Bliss and Grit is an entirely listener-supported show. Supporting us is also designed to support you through keeping the episodes rolling, but also through rewards for your donation, like a getting started guide, a private forum, and downloadable meditations. To become a supporting member, you can visit patreon.com/bliss and grit. Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we are having conversations about the awakening spiritual path and what does that mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything, the beauty and the crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life? Today, we're kind of taking our turn towards or turn away episode several steps farther. We're way out on the edge of what is an alive inquiry for us. So, in short, what we're pondering is co-creation. Or what does it look like when we cultivate a deep and intimate and always arising in any given moment relationship to life? And how is that different than, but also how is it related to I'm going to say it, the law of attraction or manifestation talk? I guess we're at the beginning of pondering what I'm using heavy air quotes here, law of attraction looks like from a non-ego driven, non-bright-siding, and no denial kind of place. If you're somebody who loves law of attraction and manifestation stuff, your curiosity is probably piqued. Maybe you're a little annoyed, I don't know. But I would say give it a listen. And if you're somebody like me who hears law of attraction and manifestation and is like, I am out, do not know why you would talk about that, give it a listen. And we'd love to hear from you after the show. If you're enjoying the show, there are a few ways you can help support us. We'd love it if you left a review on iTunes. It helps more people find the show. It's also delightful to hear such kind words from all of you and to get some feedback. You can also head over to blissandgrit.com and subscribe. We send out a weekly digest. Or you can find out about becoming one of our supporting members on Patreon. We are so grateful to all of you who are current patrons. Thank you. That's patreon.com/blissandgrit. And also, Vanessa and I both see clients privately. That's how we earn our livings. And we love supporting people on these paths, so feel free to go to the website for more information on that, too. Last thing, we do swear. So if you need to be mindful of children around or something like that, you might want some headphones. Okay, here we go.
Hello, Brooke.
Hey, Vanessa.
Just for all of you listening, little heads up, Brooke has quite the cold that she's working with. Isn't she dedicated?
So devoted. So you'll hear it in my voice, and you might hear little tea sips here and there.
You can hear that very raspy, delightful voice she has going on. So if I talk more than usual, please don't think I'm being rude to my dear friend Brooke.
It was by request. I'm trying to save the pipes.
Yeah. And I don't know, you're all going to go on a journey with us today because we're just going to talk in real time about a conversation that's been on both of our minds, which I guess is cool, right? In case any of you are ever wondering how Brooke and I process stuff or make sense of our spiritual life, you're going to hear us in real time, how we are exploring things.
I know. I always logically, I'm like, is it wise to always be talking about what's the absolute leading edge of where we are? But it seems like that's what we do here.
Interesting.
It seems like that's what wants to happen.
For us.
Yeah, right. Because then we can be like, what's really going on? And what's interesting about you and I is that those things tend to very frequently synchronize.
I remember when I studied with John Wellwood, he was the same. I mean, he'd been teaching for so many years, he would only teach what he had as a live edge. And that's
cool.
what kept it really fresh for him. So he was always in a turned on, kind of alive place with us. And we got to just benefit from whatever aliveness was moving through. Actually, I was messaging with one of our listeners the other day on Instagram. You know her, I'll tell you who it is after. But she was saying, I swear, I think we're like a pod going through a process together.
I think so too.
So
I think a lot about Thich Nhat Hanh saying the next Buddha will be the Sangha. And it's like, we're some kind of pod.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in terms of last week's conversation with Amoda and Kavi and how you had said, their relationship is like an avatar. And I was like, I think all of our listeners and us
Listen Grit's an avatar.
are an avatar. Yeah. So we are all going on this journey together. So I won't be surprised if some of you say this is very ripe and a leading edge for you. So as many of you know already, if you've been listening, Brooke and I have both been doing this process called dynamic neural retraining systems. That's essentially a way of recovering from trauma in the brain, right? And in the process, the woman who created it doesn't talk a lot about the practice itself until you're being taught it. And she does that very intentionally. I don't even need to really go into her reasons because I could only paraphrase. I don't remember them totally. But ultimately, it was that she thought it would dilute the power of the practice if you didn't have the right understanding. So I say that only because I don't want to go into what that practice is too much out of respect for Annie Hopper, who is the creator of it. Having said that, some of what's involved is that you do picture a future where whatever is constraining you in the present moment doesn't exist anymore. And there's a really good neurobiological reason why you do that, which maybe we'll get into as the course of the show goes. So what's interesting is as Brooke and I have been diving into the rabbit hole of sort of neurohacking and visioning and new future creation through the mindful process of weeding out the thoughts and emotions that are associated with your conditioning and trauma and turning towards new possibility and future. We have started to study all sorts of people who do this because that's what we do. And we've been sort of exploring, I guess, this leading edge of I want to say manifestation, but it's not.
I know that word is like so dirty, so tainted.
If you guys listened to us in the beginning, we weren't super into the law of attraction and everything like that. Yeah. So let's put it out like this. We're not into exactly the law of attraction. It seems that we can manifest something in this world, but it also seems that life has a rhyme and rhythm of its own, a rhyme and reason of its own. And so what we're exploring right now is if we're not in charge, in other words, we can't just create every single thing we want by getting into a manifestation process. Are we simply passive beings along the ride for something that God has laid out for us? And if we're not just simply passive beings along the ride for whatever God has laid out for us, what is in between those two? What's the third possibility? And that's something that today we're just going to speak about as co-creatorship. So in other words, what's the value of stepping into the role of co-creator with the universe? And what would that look like? Like, how would that look different than manifesting? And how would that look different than just praying that something would happen? And so this is our live exploration. You are in real time with us, everybody. So we'll love to hear from you on social media, all of your thoughts, and on Patreon. But let's see where it goes.
Yeah. So it's, for myself, I'll say it's the feeling of it is at turns murky, like confusing as I play with this. And other times it's like, oh, I just get to do this dance with life, which is interesting. Yeah. So I initially played with this ages ago when I was completely ego identified, to the point that, when you're ego identified in a world that is ego identified, that's just life.
You don't even know you're
really
ego
think
identified.
You are. No, you just think you are that. You think you are your habits, your belief systems, your shoulds and your shouldn'ts, your striving, your goals.
Your compulsions.
Yeah, there's nothing other than that. And so at the time when manifestation was becoming hot topic and law of attraction was having its moment.
The Secret probably had just come out.
The Secret, it had probably just landed. I was pregnant with my son and going through what my neural habits do, which is get really anxiety ridden about money. And so I'll just manifest my way out of this. And without going into the whole story, although I've mentioned bits and pieces of it here, because I was applying that from a place of fear and lack, but most importantly that I was a me who is separate from life, and I needed to bang on the door of life and be like, life, give me what I want, because this sucks and this is scary, and because I get what I want, and it had this extremely strong striving quality. Obviously, it was all made of its fascia was desperation, was the thing that wove it all together, desperation and fear. And so in order for me to keep doing that, keep believing that I could just sort of manifest my way out of it, what I had to do was turn away from what life was actually showing me. I had to bright side. I had to bypass in a very, just overlook whatever's actually happening and carry
almost
on.
Like
because
denial?
any minute now, denial. Like the magical Santa Claus bag of presents is going to land any minute now. So don't look at what's actually happening, which is, for one example, a small business loan I took out to launch a business that's being spent on groceries and diapers, right? It's if you're paying attention to life, it's something's not working here. This is not what these funds are for. And if you were paying attention, it'd be all right, I have to really think about what the business plan is, what the timeline is, what support do I need, etc. So flash forward now a bunch of years, 12, 13, since he just turned 12. And it's really actually funny to look back. I'm like, oh, I love her so much, but I don't relate to her that much. I feel really different. So I'm a lot less of a me. I understand that so much of what I identified with was conditioning and habits and all of these things that were just developed completely unconsciously and in innocence. And yet now there's awareness, right? And then along comes this stuff that we're doing, and it's danger. Is this... So the confusion comes in, the murky comes in when it's am I engaging in something? And some of this we touched on our turn towards or turn away episode, that requires me to turn away too much. And where's the line of bright siding or believing that life's going to deliver me a magical future, and what happens instead? So instead of banging on the door of life and being please give me my treats, what I am discovering is that from a less of a me place, that I am not separate from life, which is easy to say, but to have had the experience of that, that I'm having a lot better relationship with life. And that what it looks like is that it's less cognitive, hey, life, give me X, Y, or Z. It's more just something arises in me. A question, a desire, pondering. And I don't get vigilant, okay, now where's the clue going to show up? But it's almost like it arises in me and it's just in there, meaning in my being, but I'm not hyper-focused on it. And then what I notice is that life keeps delivering me, like it's like I'm having a conversation with life, which is a lot different than demanding something of life. So it's not me being separate from it. It's like doing a beautiful dance. And so, that's something I've heard a lot from a lot of spiritual teachers. I kind of got it cognitively. I experienced it plenty of times, but now it's like an ongoing, deeper intimacy with life. And yet I can still have things, right? Like human things. How's it going to go with whatever, or, turning away from anxiety patterns or things. So it's been really interesting to watch that's what seems to be emerging experientially. And that's like the place I can go where I feel interested in continuing to have this kind of inquiry about co-creation, and less like, oh no, like, am I getting on a ride I shouldn't be getting on again? I don't know about you. Have you had experiences like that where you're manifesting from a very contracted, unconscious me state?
Nothing sounds like, I can't think of anything that's as similar to that description you gave, where you were like literally trying to manifest something, because I never played with manifestation that much. I was kind of wary of it off the bat for some reason. Mm-hmm. Like something in me was like, that sounds too easy. Like I don't know. I was wary of it off the bat. So I don't think I engaged with it too much, but I know how I tried to make anything happen from an ego place. Like that's obvious. And I was thinking about that bright siding thing you were saying. And before I forget, I thought, well, I think one of the important things is, when we talk about, let's say, for example, turning your attention away from the conditioning that's rattling around your mind all of the time, the fear, the anxiety, the lack, right? And all of the belief systems that stir that, and turning towards a new future and a new possibility. We're really talking about an internal state. But bright siding is ignoring facts of life, because you're convinced something will look better as long as you don't look at those facts of life, and it's all going to happen. It makes me think about one of the wonderful questions that Matt Kahn offers to people, which is to ask themselves what they need. Like, what am I needing right now? So perhaps in that example, Brooke, when you realized, I'm, in retrospect, I'm using my business loan for diapers and such. If we were attuned to ourselves and turning into like, what do I need right now? Maybe that question would come up like, well, I need money to pay for my child's diapers, right? And I need a source that's sustainable. So I think it's nice to recognize that this is not at all, neither of us at this moment in our lives, in any way, shape, or form, are ignoring the facts that are on the table, right? We are not in denial of anything that's happening. What we are doing, at least if I speak for myself, what I am doing is recognizing very clearly I am not the thoughts and states of mind that I have come to identify as an I, right? I'm not my conditioning, and I'm not my trauma loops, in which case I don't have to pay that much attention to them. That was the other episode. Y'all can go back if you didn't hear it. But what will I do instead, right? So then this is where our conversation starts to get cool, because, well, I could pray, and I think we've all done that on some level. Dear universe, dear God, please give me something better. I'm so ready for something better. Okay, well, that's sweet. In a way, it's kind of like self-loving, and I've certainly done that. Please give me, sort of approach. But that is, at the very least, disempowering. But if you take it farther, you could use the term that Reverend Michael Beckwith uses in one of his books called Life Visioning, which is, it's a victim consciousness. I only get to receive if life is good enough, and if life doesn't answer my prayers, it's because they somehow think I don't deserve it, and it's about worth, and if I'm worthy, some benevolent figure will deliver unto me, but if I don't get my prayer, I'm probably unworthy, and that is the proof I was seeking. and we feel really stuck. We feel really contracted. And oftentimes we feel at the whim of some other forces in life. Okay, so I've done that approach. So then we start to think about imagining a new future, which is what you and I are really talking about. And like, is that too manifesty, and is that too close to like this?
Yeah, what's the nuanced place where this is a genuine lived inquiry and not
ego
some
attempt to escape itself?
Right.
Yeah, because if we look at it from the ego perspective, just to like highlight, the ego perspective is always, I need this in order to feel. Right?
I will finally be happy. I will finally be free. I will finally be able to relax if I can get X, Y, Z.
And in innocence, sometimes I picture the ego like the opposite way. Like it's like, life, if you don't give me X, Y, and Z, I'm going to hold my breath. And I'm not going to be in service, and I'm not going to do anything good. And then that doesn't work. So then it's like, okay, life, I'll do everything you want. Just give me that thing. I just need that thing.
Right. And as Matt Kahn pointed out, and it helps me so much, is like, if it's some excuse to keep needing to anticipate something, the ego's at play, right? Like, because it's totally the dangling carrot thing, or, like when I get that, it's always just out of reach. Once I get it, and that there's always something to anticipate.
Which is funny. We all know that about our minds, right? Like, today you may be living a life that you dreamed about, whatever, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and all you can feel is, but there's that one more thing that I really need.
Totally, I know.
And then I'll be happy and at peace, and I'll be the love that I really am. Okay, so we understand kind of the tricky shapes the ego can take when we're approaching a practice like this. Problem is, it's almost like we're trying to create a new future using the old consciousness, the old level of awareness, which is a conditioned and outdated and ineffectual approach. If you think about it from the standpoint of, I'm trying to create something I've never seen before in my life, something new, something fresh, right? Something that I was lacking. That's why I feel like I need it. Maybe it was a sense of abundance, or a sense of worth, or a sense of gratitude, or, a sense of love, something I didn't have. So I think, when I get this, I'll finally get that, right? But the ego, if we come from the energy and the mentality of the ego system, we approach it the same way we have anything. Either we're on our knees groveling, or we're standing up like, I am in control and I will manifest it. Or we're like, I demand it. And we probably cycle through all three, Sometimes I'm on my knees begging.
And they all, totally. And they all perfectly illustrate a very stark separation. Yes. Right? It's you against
either
life.
You're controlling life, or you're praying that life will give you some goodies because it's a deserved reward situation.
Yeah. There's no I am life is me.
There's no sense. There's no sense of that. And there's no recognition that sometimes it just may be true that what we would call pain or hardship is coming our way for our highest good. Now,
and we can all look in the rearview mirror and see that. It doesn't feel good. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But, we can have experiences like, that cracked me open in a way that I had a total blind spot on.
So that's the interesting part, I think, is trying to create something new and fresh while recognizing that perhaps we're not ultimately in control, and perhaps we don't need to ultimately be in control. Like maybe if my ego was in control, it would create a disaster of a life or a less than nourishing version of a life, because the ego is the aspect of self that has been conditioned. So it is not new. It is not extremely creative. It is the past getting recycled into the present and the future. So the way I've been thinking about it is kind of twofold. So part of my level of exploration is neurobiological. So I think about it, I think Matt Kahn's going to be our theme this episode. I think about it
again. Hi, Matt.
I think about it from the standpoint of when Matt would talk about the nervous system and just familiar and foreign, right? Just very basic, that what's foreign to the nervous system or the brain or to the ego structure can get labeled as unsafe or just even not coming my way. It's not a part of me. It's not a part of my atmosphere. And that, what's familiar, even if it's unhealthy for you, can keep getting recreated because it's deemed safe, welcome, part of life, how I am, fill in the blanks. So neurobiologically, when I envision a future where I am, in this case, extremely healthy, able to do anything I want, from that perspective, really happy, really abundant, whatever I'm envisioning, what I imagine is this is not just because I want to manifest this, which, P.S., I'll take it all. I'm happy if I do manifest it. But on the neurobiological level, I think what I am doing, since the brain can't differentiate internalized pictures from reality, is I am finally upgrading my brain to become familiar with the states that I'm inviting into my life. So I'm familiarizing the brain and the nervous system with I am healthy and a state of health. I am familiarizing the brain and the nervous system with abundance. I have abundance. Of course I would. Why wouldn't I? This isn't unsafe. This isn't foreign. This isn't out of the question of my ecosystem, right? And so on and so forth. So I think it's interesting just to look from the neurobiological level that we can do a biohack with intentionality and consciousness to give our body, brain, nervous system input that it may not have had before, like love.
Yeah.
Or a model of health, or a model of abundance.
Yeah, one of the ones I've been playing with is feeling very supported by life, which is not a familiar feeling, although if you look at my life, like it's hella well supported, but the feeling of not being supported by life, all of that stuff because of early environment and I'm sure ancestral stuff of like, I have to do, like I'm Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill all the time, or I'm Atlas, holding the world on my shoulders is like the conditioning. So I am totally supported by life, not so familiar. So when I touch into it, in meditations and what it would feel like in my body, in my being, to walk around in life knowing that, I get to experience the sensation of it using my imagination for good and not evil for once, because the ego loves to use it for ill, right? Out of habit. And what I notice is if I touch that sensation, walking around in the world as somebody who feels totally supported by life, two things have come up. First, I see with so much more subtlety all of the layers of victim martyr consciousness in me. And I don't feel ashamed of it, like I did something wrong, or like, oh my God, I can't believe I still have that playing in there. I thought that was all cleared out. It's just that I see how much of the me that I thought I was crafted out of this idea of lack, and also that I get my needs met if I'm the victim martyr. I exist. I just plain old exist if I'm the victim martyr in a scenario where I grew up, where I didn't exist if there wasn't something really going wrong. And I've seen that before, but it's like I keep seeing, it's just amazing, actually, the amount of clarity I have on seeing that. And it's so relieving, as opposed to it being damning or shameful. It's like a relief. It's like, oh, there it is again. Oh, that came up again. And so if that was running so deeply, unconsciously in so many of the scenarios of my life, like, of course, that was what I was experiencing. And so if I instead feel the worthiness, the second thing that's happening, besides the one where I can see victim martyr consciousness was underlying so much of what I used to feel, the second thing is I actually get to realize the truth of how much support I have. Like, I was sitting with my office mate the other day. We were having a little meeting about the office, not about anything in particular. And I wasn't even talking to her about what's on my mind, which is that I'm growing my embodied coaching practice. And I would like to replace my Rolfing practice with that. She knows that's what's up, but we weren't talking directly. We're actually talking about the actual office and rent and boring stuff. And she just looked at me. She had met someone about an office, and they found out that I was her office mate, and they had listened to Liberated Body and Bliss and Grit. And they were like, oh my God, you guys have to come over here. And she just kind of touched my knee, my office mate, and she said, I know you don't always realize this, but like people know the work that you're doing in the world, and they appreciate it, and they like it, and they want to help you. Like they want to support you. She goes, you could ask for more help. Like you could let more people know that you exist and you could use some support. And I was like, oh. And that just like hit me really hard because I was receptive, and it's exactly what I've been meditating on. And now I'm like, oh, my practice has been slow. Oh yeah, I can just, like I can write to all the Liberated Body people and be like, come out of the closet and be like, yeah, I've been doing this coaching practice for a couple of years now. I trained with Judith Blackstone. This is my life now. Like this is what I deeply care about in private practice. If any of you want to work with me, it's so interesting. Like I see all of these opportunities now of just being like, oh yeah, I'm really well supported by life. I just missed it because Victim Martyr had a blind spot on it. So that to me is a very exciting version of co-creation where I'm in a relationship with life.
Yeah, you're active listening. And your level of awareness is shifting neurologically, because when you look at how it fires neurobiologically, awareness of the habitual things is autopilot, right? So nothing new comes in if we're in that default mode. No creative way of thinking, no creative way of experiencing. As you start to engage the creation in your brain, that level of awareness that fires with creativity, which we are doing when you visualize a future being different than what you have, you're getting into creation mode, right? And that's going to change your energy. It's going to change what you perceive, which is part of what you're talking about. Because that woman could have said that to you 2 years ago, and you might have just been like,
and I would have missed it.
Or no one supports me. Or
I'm not running that show anymore.
Who knows?
Like I totally would have done that and been like, Liberated Bodies, Bliss and Grit now.
I don't want anything to do with it.
So funny.
I think that's really cool. I had this, just to take it and make it more esoteric, because I love that. So I have an aunt I've never talked about on the show really, but my aunt is a mystic, quite a mystic. And one of the things she sends me a text on, because she knows I'm doing this process of rewiring my brain, and she's super respectful. But one of the things she sends me a little note on, like a little note from the universe, is like, if you don't know that you're light and you think that you're a material body, it won't change.
Yeah, man, yes. That is like the bottom line of this episode, right?
And I'm like, I know. Okay, so this is where good old Joe Dispenza comes in. Love him, hate him. I don't really care, because I take from teachers what I find to be revelatory for me, right? Anything that gives me a realization, that's what I'm looking on. And for those of you who wonder how Brooke and I study so many teachers, this is what we do. We don't think everyone should do what we do. We are astronauts for like the inner psyche and the awakening process. This is our calling in life. And so it is part of what I do is I do a survey. Like I understand what are people thinking and what are they doing? And we try to gather that information and synthesize it in a way that makes sense. So Joe Dispenza,
Just our calling. Yep.
He is somebody who's got a pretty loud voice on the scene of mind-body medicine and consciousness studies, and using your consciousness to shift the conditions in your life, right? Whatever the material conditions are in your life. One of the things I thought that was interesting when I was reading him, and this is very different than Annie Hopper. For those of you who've gotten interested in DNRS, which is what I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, Annie Hopper has a methodology. It is not spiritual. It is not meant to be spiritual. Mm-hmm. It is very neurobiological. It is a very specific program to take the associations your brain has formed, the negative associations, your brain has formed around this is dangerous, and recondition it with positivity and a new vision for your future so your brain can break those associations and create new, let's call them healthier associations, right? So her process is very neurobiological, but baked into it, it happens to be very loving, very sweet, and very opening. And of course, women like Brooke and I, when we do these processes, mine is ridiculously spiritual, right? Everyone will bring to the table what they bring to the table. But she doesn't get into a spiritual conversation on this. This is just a neurobiological reprogramming that is bound to make you a happier, healthier person. Joe Dispenza is different. He is getting into consciousness studies and the spiritual dimension. And he doesn't call it like the Akashic field. He calls it the quantum field. But things like this are part of his conversation. And one of the things he brings into the exploration of co-creatorship or manifestation, and don't let me forget to come back to Reverend Michael Beckwith at the end, because I just think it's important. Okay. I remember that. But one of the things he brings into this conversation is, in order for you to manifest something new in your life in a way that is rapid and not based in time, because the material dimension is based in time and moves quite slowly, is to first get to a state of emptiness.
Right. First, drop yourself.
Yes. Then rebuild yourself. First, realize you have no self. You're not in time. Yeah. There is no time. There is no place. There is no body. And then recreate your body. That's the same as my aunt saying, first you have to recognize you're not material. Because if you're material, you subscribe to the laws of the material universe. Someone could say Newtonian physics as opposed to quantum physics. You're in the Newtonian law. And that still we can make change. But we know how tedious it can be because we've all been in this Newtonian plane for a while.
Well, and especially if we're, I was going to say prone to ruts, but we're all prone to ruts. It's what we are. Like we have habits. It's what we are when we're identified as a separate self.
Ready.
Right.
So, naturally, oh, that's so funny. I'm looking at a piece of artwork you gave me that I have hanging over my desk, and it says, "You make light."
I forgot about that.
Right as I'm talking about it, that was really funny. So I just think, I love the mystical shit. I mean, I am a mystic. When I do these practices, quite frankly, talking about co-creatorship, I am hearing voices in my head. I am not just in a passive process, right? I am being informed. So can I just bring in Reverend Michael Beckwith? Told you I was going to talk a lot. Okay. So what I loved about exploring Reverend Michael Beckwith's approach, and I'll just call him Michael Beckwith from now on, but his approach to all of this is he talks about victim consciousness, which is what you were describing, Brooke, but just in general, the sense that please let me deserve something. Please someone help me and give me my goods. I am a passive participant and things are happening to me. And then he talks about after that is the manifestor consciousness. And you get hey, you know what? I can control some of this shit. I have some autonomy, which is cool, right? We start to realize we have choice. We start to shape our choices a little bit. But it's still very ego-driven. It's still, I'll be happy when I have these material circumstances, whatever they are, a partner, health, money, whatever they are. And it's still not evolving yet into the soulful level. The recognition that I am one with the universe, I am one with God, and that everything, my will is God's will, and God's will is my will. And that's a place we could also call surrender, right? But it is a co-creation. It is not just a letting go, because you are very active in this process, interestingly enough. So he has a whole step-by-step for anyone who's curious called life visioning. It's lovely. I'm in love with him. I want to go to Agape Church so bad. So if anyone knows him, I want him on the show very badly. But I think this is now interesting because how he differentiates life visioning is that you start to become very open to receiving what is meant to come through you rather than what you want to manifest. Soul versus ego. Because, what is the ego going to come up with when it thinks, what should I manifest?
Right. I'll only be happy when I'm thin and rich. It's like, that's not, there are so many really unhappy, thin and rich people. Dude, it can't be true. Though,
just the other day, my ego was in a tizzy. Like, I haven't heard from my ego in a while. And then I realized I had been hearing from it. I just didn't know because it was so subtle, because it was so believable. And damned if I don't think that if I was hotter, I'd be happier.
Oh my God. Well, we all, as women, we get that just utterly talk about brainwashing, a whole culture devoted to that message. Yeah. I finally deserve to exist. I am smoking hot.
And my version of hot is probably different than other versions. It's like super radiant and alive.
Right.
It's not maybe the classical version, but it was really funny. I could see I was having this real flare and a kind of meltdown where I was like, I just need proof that what I'm doing is working. It was like this real stuck place in my brain. It was a rut and I couldn't quite get it to move. And as always is the case with these things, the conditioned voices that were coming through in the rut make sense to me still in that moment when I'm in the rut. Right? Because it's the level of consciousness that created the rut coming through.
They're just you. If you're in the rut, that's just you. That's the voice of you.
These are the voices I've listened to for 40-something years, right? So the voices are coming through I need a concrete change. I need to see something, and what I realized in retrospect after I went and sat and meditated and actually moved through this whole process was it was all in time. So it was all the ego. As soon as there's a timeline, your ego's operating. It was all based on false assumptions. I'll be happy and life will have proved itself to me when I'm hot,
That's the title of our first book that we're going to write.
Life proved itself to me because I'm hot now.
Because I'm hot. And you can too.
Manifesting hotness. And of course, it's so laughable when you see it. And I sat and I really opened a channel within myself. And I got coming through me this wisdom, that this was wonderful, that this was happening because it was exposing the ways my ego was still invested in the process and where there hasn't been a surrender. And hey, listen, everybody, no big deal, right? No judgment.
Yeah, surrendering is just going to happen a million times. And actually, there's something really great about it. I think it's one of the really satisfying things about being a human being is that you're a human being and you get to go recently, oh yeah, victim martyr is still just really woven into the foundation of me. And it's not go away. It's oh my God, so fascinating. It's cool to be able to experience being a multidimensional person.
Well, you know why I think in part it's cool for you and for me, and I think maybe it's worthwhile expressing this out loud, is, okay, so I'm doing this practice to recover health and vitality and to be more free where I don't have so many triggers in the world and in my environment, right? So that's why I'm doing DNRS. But of course, in no short amount of, just immediately, in short order, I co-opt this process to one where I'm really awakening myself. And then I realize again that there's one thing I care about in this world besides the humans I love, which is awakening. And so, of course,
you and I both.
We care about the awakening of human consciousness within ourselves and within others and on this planet. Of course, we find it interesting to observe the movements of consciousness. Ooh, I slipped back into ego. Ooh, I got out of ego. Ooh, this is what it feels like when you are channeling voices that are clearly not your own. Oh my God, I am co-creating. See, so I don't know if everyone feels the same way, but I think part of what makes it so fascinating to us is because of what we're dedicated to.
Right, that we're called to really trace the shapes and movements and nuance and subtlety of exactly this, for sure. I'm I got nothing.
Well, because I
have sick brain.
I'm into a really weird place. No, but I think what I am enjoying pondering is, okay, so I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. So one is, I think it's cool that we can be empowered enough to retrain our brains and our nervous systems. And I think we should. Mm-hmm. I think that if it comes from grace, hella awesome. That's part of your life path, right? But I also think we are all suffering to greater and lesser extent from intergenerational trauma, from cultural trauma, and from personal and familial trauma to greater and lesser extent. Because look around out there, right? Look at what's happening in the collective, and you can guess you are suffering from trauma on those different kinds of levels, right? And I just had a client who, I don't think she'd mind me just saying this, shared some of her brain scans with me. She did lens neurofeedback and got measurements. Oh, cool. And you can see the result of certain upbringings on your brain. I mean, it is clear as day. Now, the way I sit with all of this, and this really was something Joe Dispenza teaches, is you are not your body. This is why it's important to perhaps see it as you are the light or emptiness or whatever language, the soul that you want to see is. This beautiful edge that you and I have been exploring, Brooke, is that something's coming through the body. You cannot deny your human experience because, hey, we're obviously humans for a reason, right? Like, clearly, this is for some reason, and we have a body. And it's important you don't deny it, but rather you inhabit it as part of the fullness of your potentiality. Conversely, if you think you are just your body, there's a whole different level of tension that you'll confront because that's not true either. Judith Blackstone's practices are kind of beautiful because they acknowledge you have a body and then they acknowledge you're more than your body, all in one elegant process, right? But this recognition that you have a consciousness that's not your body is extremely true and helpful. Because then when you realize, okay, well, my body has been conditioned in trauma or in fear or in anxiety or in lack or in I'll never have money, I'll never have love. Whatever you've been conditioned, your body's been conditioned. And I mean, after all of these years of doing Bliss and Grit, we can see that it's true. It affects your nervous system. It affects your fascia. It affects your brain. You still have a consciousness that can get enough freedom, enough awareness to see that that's happening. But it didn't happen to your soul, your higher self, fundamental consciousness, right? You're always whole. So then I think once we understand that we are not just our body, we can start to influence and heal our body. Matt Kahn quote that I use all the time, we are the angel for these bodies. Yeah. He really, and I am impressed by how much I now see in retrospect that Matt understands neurobiology without ever cracking a book on it. But you are the angel for this body. So one of the things we're doing, because you and I still never get totally into manifestation like hook, line, and sinker, only because we can't get into the egoic level of it. But one of the things I see is I am giving my body a beautiful experience of something new. And just in case that's part of the co-creatorship of this life, I am going to prime it. I'm going to prepare it. I'm going to teach it that this is welcome and beautiful and that it totally can come to me, that this is not foreign or unwanted. And I think that's really freaking cool. Does that mean money's going to manifest in my life? I don't know. Let you know. Right? Like, who knows?
Who knows?
But do I think that it will bring more freedom to me? Where the fear that I won't have doesn't have to run me. You know, the fear that I won't have whatever. Love, money, health, hotness. Right? Do I? Yes, that's what I think. I look at it as freeing up the wires so that we do not have to have that conditioned ache. That ache that says, if I don't get this, I'm just, nothing's worth it, or I'll never be happy, or I'll never be worthy, whatever fill in the blank is. We can do that by reprogramming our neurobiology. now take it one step further. I enjoy coming to a place of emptiness and re-envisioning myself. I really enjoy playing right now, and it is a playground with recognizing we are more than our body, and we can then play with emerging in a whole new way. And what if, from the quantum reality, our body can completely rearrange itself? That is a total thought experiment I am into. And then lastly, I am loving that even though I may visualize certain very specific futures, like for me, maybe I'm exercising and I'm in the tropics and, it's hot, but I don't notice, like I'll picture certain specific things. I like to spend some time every day in complete surrender, just opening up to guidance. Like whatever wants to come through me, recognizing it comes through me, but it is me, but it's not me, but because I don't yet know that it is me. That's only a thought for me. I know that I feel oneness, but I don't yet feel that I am God are the same, or I am we know the difference in the conversation. Yeah. So I think, this is some really cool shit. And the way I always feel about it is like, I mean, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if these things are, I don't know, blind sides? Let's say it like that. What if? Well, as long as I'm not avoiding the facts of life, right? The basic needs, like I'm feeding my body and I'm feeding my child and my bills are paid. And like, as long as I'm not ignoring the facts of life and in denial, well, who cares if I'm wrong? Because the outcome is I'm still a happier person.
Right. Yeah. As long as there's not, and I think that for some of us with certain kinds of brains, like me, historically in the past, like it took some doing for me to not be dissociated to the point that I wasn't paying attention to certain markers, right? Like, so for some of us, we can make very severely dysfunctional things seem normal. So, I'll say that. And, maybe to end the call with actually a practice that's been coming up a lot with my coaching clients that I've been doing, because it's actually related in that way. It's something that people can play with or practice with. And I've been calling it true prayer or genuine prayer, so like what we think of as prayer is either something that's like heavily religious, and it's something you do in a specific setting and with specific dogmatic attachments that you're following the rules, or it's God as Santa Claus, right? Like, please, please, God, all the stuff we've been talking about. Please, please, God, give me what I really want. So it emphasizes that, both emphasize that separation with life. But true prayer is more like you have this intimacy with life, even if you don't directly know that you and life are one and the same. There's this intimacy with it. And so it's more like going on a scavenger hunt. So if there's something that is really pressurized, meaning something that's irritating in life, that you would like to see change, that you can say to the self and to source at the same time, like, please help me. Like, I would like some information, support, insight about this particular issue. And then you just remind yourself from time to time through your day that you have like an active prayer in the system. And it's not a vigilant scavenger hunt like, oh, maybe I should, and I've totally done this before, where it's like, oh, I guess I was just led into Barnes & Noble, and I guess I'm just led to buy these 32 books that I'm going to read in 2 days. And it was totally just like this graspy, vigilant movement. But if we can let go, and the movement I keep doing as I'm talking about it, and I do with my clients too, it's very open-handed. So you can feel when you're grabbing towards something energetically. And this is just, you remind yourself your hands are just open to see. And by hands open, I mean being open. Like as you walk through your life, what's the information that might arrive? Like in the instance with my office mate, when she said that. Like, I had an active prayer about, like, God, I just feel like 20 years in practice as a rolfer and 2 years in practice as a coach. And these ebbs and flows, and I had all this stuff going on because I moved my office recently, and things have been quiet since I moved my office. And then along comes this beloved person, and it lands. You can feel when it's the answer to a prayer because it really sticks with you. It gets your attention without you having to go get it or go grab it. And that can be really fun to play with because then you're directly acknowledging the relationship with life and that life is there to communicate with you. I'm giggling because life is you, but like if we think about it as a conversation, life is there happy to have a convo. And really it's just a trick, right, for bringing things up to awareness, bringing things up to a more conscious level so that you can see the synchronicities or see the insights or feel something land as like, such good insights, such good information. So that's worth playing with, and it's different than, as Matt Kahn would say, God as Amazon Prime.
I think just the same way as you may say it, fundamentally you and I are one. We know you and I are also separate. And I think life can come through in many ways, angels, guides, voices, God, dreams, it can come through in all of these different ways. And one of the things that Michael Beckwith offered that I think is interesting to my mind at least is that after you sort of open-handedly pray for guidance on what you're meant to bring through in this lifetime, what your soul is meant to create, you ask to the effect, my questions may be off, but essentially, what capacities do I need to build within myself to be able to do that? And what do I need to release to be able to do that? Now that seems like a really interesting level because it pops an ego bubble really quick, right? Because if the ego just wants to manifest, it does not want to have to do very much. It wants it to happen in the way it wants it to happen. Even if it's like, I'm going to work really hard, but it wants to do what it wants to do. Because ego is the controller, right? So it's got to control the process. So I think it's really interesting and you have to get into a meditation first, right? So there's a zone you're in when you're asking yourself these questions. So it's not just your ego rattling off its own answers. But I think that's interesting. And it sort of reflects on like what Matt Kahn would say is that sometimes things don't come to you because you're not ripe for them yet. That certain qualities and conditions need to be cultivated before you could handle or be able to excel at all of the things you want to come to you in your life. That maybe there is this rhyme or reason to things. And who knows? But I think it's an interesting thing to explore where you go, well, what would I want to invite into myself to be at the level where, let's just pretend someone wanted to make $1 million, right? And what would I need to let go of? Well, maybe fear, maybe always making those self-deprecating jokes I like to do in front of people, and so on and so forth. I just think it's a nice little interesting level. And if y'all like that, we'll include the book in the show notes, and they offer some classes around it too through Agape Church. So that could be really fun for people who are like, great, this was a lovely conversation. Where do I start? And who aren't like us, because I'm like, with everyone, everyone, wherever you want, Joe Dispenza or Annie Hopper or everyone, right. That can be the interesting part, but it's just maybe having that open-handed prayer of knowing where to begin for you.
Thank you so much for being a part of our community and for listening to today's show. The show notes, which include any resources that we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. If you go to the website and scroll down, you will see each episode's separate post, and the resources are in there. Our member platform is at patreon.com/blissandgrit. So it's a place where you can be a patron of the show, meaning you donate a small monthly amount to keep the episodes rolling, but you also get rewards for your support. So there is a private forum, there's a getting started guide, there are downloadable meditations. So if you're wanting to engage with this process and these topics in a deeper way, it is a really good place to go. That's, I already said it, but patreon.com/bliss and grit. You can also come say hi on Instagram and Facebook or subscribe to the website, which is blissandgrit.com. We send out a Friday digest of resources that we're loving. We are so grateful for the reviews you've written, for all of the membership support you've provided, and all of the notes that you send. Thank you. We'll be back next week.